Welcome to the Employer Insights webinar, Culture at Microsoft. This virtual event is being hosted by the University of Washington Professional and Continuing Education. My name's Jo Gubas and I'm the Community and Industry Relations Officer. I know most of you will be familiar with us, but for those who aren't, our team helps people keep learning at the University of Washington. So even if you're working full-time or juggling family commitments or live outside of the Seattle area, you can come and keep learning with us. We offer over 70 certificate programs, hundreds of courses, boot camps, and part-time master's programs in almost every field. As many of our learners are thinking about career changes and new jobs, we've developed some career resources to support you in your next steps. And this Employer Insights panel is part of a new series of spotlights on leading employers, where we can learn more about their approach to people, company culture, and hiring. And today we're going to hear from our friends at Microsoft. Microsoft is on a mission to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. With over 160,000 employees across the globe, how does this tech giant bring its people together to make this work happen? The answer is its culture, and we're going to explore that with our panelists today. And we're also going to hear about some paths into careers at Microsoft and tips for people thinking about applying. But before we get started, I want to encourage you to add questions for the panel in the Q&A during the discussion. We'll tackle as many of those as possible later in the session. You can use the thumbs up feature to upvote any questions that you'd like to have answered. The last thing I'd like to say is that the session is being recorded and we'll email the recording out to you next week in case you want to rewatch parts of it again. And with that, I'm going to introduce Adam Grupp. Adam has been with Microsoft for over 10 years. He's currently Director of Microsoft Rewards, leading a global team focused on customer loyalty. Adam is also one of our prize certificate instructors. For the last 10 years, he's taught the product strategy class that's part of the University of Washington's Software Product Management Certificate Program. He's been a phenomenal teacher and mentor to hundreds of our professional students. And it's great to have you here today, Adam, to lead the discussion.
Hi, Jo. Thank you so much.
Great. Well, I'd go ahead and intro the panel and take it away.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. First of all, thanks for taking your lunch hour to listen in on a conversation and share your questions with us. We're looking forward to speaking with you. We've got a great panel today representing some different parts of Microsoft. We're joined by Flavia, Grace, and Mark. And I'm actually going to let them introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about their backgrounds and their Microsoft journeys, and then we'll get into some questions.
Hi, everyone. My name is Flavia. I'm a principal software engineer manager at the Mixed Reality team. This is the team that creates products like HoloLens, our VR products, many services in Azure that relates to 3D world, like spatial anchors, remote rendering. My team has both a group of data engineers and data scientists. I also have PMs that work with data collection to help us get the necessary data to train our complex models. And I also have a PM that works with some of our internal tools.
I'll go next. Hi, everyone. My name is Mark Licata. I am a director of product marketing, and I focus on Microsoft 365 consumer subscriptions. I'm an alumni of the University of Washington. My degree is in human-centered design.
Hey everyone, my name is Grace McJones and I currently work at Microsoft as an Azure customer engineer. I got into Microsoft through an apprenticeship program called LEAP, and I think that's something I'll dive into later. Been at the company for over 3 years. Outside of work, I have a podcast and I love photography and anything that has to do with green tea. I love green tea over coffee, even though I am in Seattle. So I'm just gonna throw that out there.
Wonderful. All right, guys. Well, welcome. Good to have you here. And excited to have you share more of your own experiences at Microsoft with the attendees today. Where I'd love to start us out today is with the topic of culture. You know, this is something that's top of mind in this monthly series with PCE, and something that a lot of us as instructors in PCE talk about more organically in class sessions. And Flavia, I think I'm going to pick on you first, if that's okay, because I know you've seen a couple different phases of cultural evolution at Microsoft. And so I guess my question to you, and then we have some time for others to chime in if they want to, is how have you seen culture evolve at Microsoft over time? And maybe related to this, how do you see it from your vantage point as one person, and how do you act upon it?
I love the question because not only is it the main topic, but also because it is around everything that we do. To give people context, let me give an extra piece of information about myself. I've been in Microsoft since 2001. So I had a little bit of the Bill Gates phase, I had the Steve Ballmer phase, and now Satya. And they were all very different. They, in their own way, pushed on what was needed at the time. I am incredibly thankful for Satya's push on culture, on how we do things. And even for people that are outside of Microsoft, if you heard a little bit about Microsoft, you at least heard something around growth mindset. If you hear Satya talking about how we work, he's probably going to bring it up. And it's not just this word to keep repeating and waiting for people to land the impact of it. It is really how it changes the way we work. It's easy to say, oh yeah, we have growth mindset. We try things and learn from it. But if you stop to think about what it means on the day-to-day is, if you are taking a risk and your risk fails, if the outcome of this is, hey, what you did is bad, or what you did, there are going to be bad consequences, how are you going to take risks again? So you have to have this environment that motivates you to take risks. It allows you to be creative. Of course, when you are taking this risk, either it pays off and some very clear goodness comes out of it, but the outcome may also be, you know what, it didn't work, but now I know something that I didn't know before. And you share that information with your peers and colleagues. And now a bigger group of people know what you learned. And the next time you go try to solve something similar, you are not going to fall into that same mistake because you already learned and multiple people learn with you. And that is the transformational piece. It's not just Satya saying growth mindset. It's really changing how managers and individual contributors think about it and act as a result of it. I think the other piece that relates to that is moving away from the person that knows it all, from the person that wants to know it all. So you hear more questions, which gets more people in the room to think about other possibilities. If you are not afraid of what people are going to think if you ask this, potentially silly question, you're going to be quiet, and maybe your question would be the one that would prevent a problem in the future. So having that safe space where people bring ideas, where people try new things, is really about what is growth mindset. There are other parts of the culture that Satya pushes. The growth mindset, it's probably the most known one, but then there is the customer obsession, which is doesn't need as much of an explanation. I think anyone would see the value of that. There's another piece that also took time, I believe, for everyone to get the goodness that it brings in. And now it's just so obvious when it comes to diversity and inclusion. Diversity, both in bringing different people with different ideas, with different experiences. If we are building a product for the world, we need to have people in the company that can represent this world. And the second piece is on the inclusion, on how we treat each other, which in my head is very tightly close to the growth mindset. If the way we treat each other isn't set up in a way that you bring people in, that you make them comfortable, sharing their ideas with their own styles, it's really hard to get people to try things because they don't feel they are part of it. I see a lot of those things in practice in my day-to-day, both from in my organization. Think about it, HoloLens, we are creating this device that you mix the real world with holograms. It is like tip of the spear type of technology. You can't build something like that if you are not taking risks, if you are not trying new things. There were so many points in our journey of mixed reality that we knew we had to do something, and there were no other, or competitor or peer team that had solved that problem. We just had to come up with it. And the second piece that I would like to say that I see and I act on my day-to-day is this caring of what I'm doing is important, what my colleagues are doing is important too. And we need to figure out how to help each other with our always big list of things to do. But if we put together a conversation to understand, hey, what is more important for the business right now? Then maybe the right thing to do is for me to put a pause on something I was doing and help this person. So I feel that nowadays it's so much easier to make those decisions.
That's a great answer, Flavia. And you touched on some really powerful themes that resonated for me as an employee, that notion of the growth mindset and how that permeates. It's also kind of a challenging notion, right? To open to growth. It can be kind of scary sometimes. And I think that's where what you mentioned about the importance of creating safety in teams is so crucial. That last point that you touched on, I want to hit again also, which is that idea of one team or mutuality, and how we are learning to be more impactful as we work together, not just staying in our own individual silos. You take it all together, it's kind of a lot. It's a tall order, but I think the way you describe it really resonates for me as an employee. I'd love to go on to a related question, and this one might be one for Grace or Mark to take a shot at first. When we think about our current environment, in the world, things that are going on, it's been a pretty rough year in a lot of ways, and a lot of things have bubbled up that we're going to be working through for a generation. Not to mention the immediate day-to-day of what it's like working from behind a screen, like we all are right now. So what's it like to work at Microsoft in this current environment? And how do you stay connected to your team or to your colleagues?
Yeah, I can jump in. So I guess given a little bit of backstory, going to college, Microsoft didn't come to recruit at my school. I went to a small state college in Texas, studied computer science, but that's not after, I think, dropping out the first time, going to a Christian private university, but it was so expensive. And so when I discovered Microsoft, it was through the Grace Hopper conference. And there I was kind of amazed by the amount of people who were there, especially women, doing great work, sharing their research, sharing their projects. And that's something I wasn't exposed to in my CS classes. So now, like working at Microsoft, for me, it's been great to kind of see the collaboration like spirit of like working, not all working together, but like people sharing their ideas. And my onboarding experience was definitely unique to me because I started through the, like, as I mentioned, the Microsoft Leap program. And so when I converted into full-time, my team had onboarding buddy for me. And so going from not being in corporate America to being in corporate America was definitely different. And then going from living in Texas to Seattle was definitely a culture shock. So there's a lot of things I didn't know, a lot of things I didn't expect, but something that I think really helped me was, the safe space that was mentioned earlier to ask questions, right? My manager told me at the time, like, hey, don't act like you know it all, or don't act like you have to pretend and say, okay, I don't want to embarrass myself, like I don't want to act like I don't know what I'm doing. It's important to like feel forward in terms of like trying new things and admitting like, hey, I need help. And my team providing me a buddy to go to when I had questions was definitely, I think, something that enhanced my experience, especially first year at Microsoft, because there were a lot of acronyms. Microsoft has a ton of acronyms that I was like, what does this mean? Where do I get this information? And so sometimes I would just ping ping me a message. My buddy, like, okay, what does this mean? And he's like, oh, this is what this means, or this is the website you can get all this information and whatnot. And so there's nuanced things that, for someone who's been in the company for a long time, you already know that stuff. But coming in as someone new, I'm just kind of like, I'm kind of lost for words. But having someone I can go to so that I don't feel like embarrassed was definitely something that was like a game changer for me personally. And coming through the LEAP program, I was kind of like grateful to have a community, because people who had converted to FTE, I could also reach out to them and like say, hey, like, how are you doing this? Or how are you able to like get promoted and things like that. So I had a sub community of people that I could reach out to. And lastly, I think being part of ERGs, employee resource groups, was also very valuable to me. Part of Blacks at Microsoft and Africans at Microsoft as an Indian American immigrant. And so having those sub communities has been very helpful to me, because then I can ask questions related to my lived experience and things that they were doing, and also how to volunteer and give back. And so those are a couple of things that has, made my onboarding experience at Microsoft very memorable and very helpful for me.
Yeah, well, that's great, Grace. As you were talking about acronyms, I couldn't help but think about my own onboarding experience. I had a manager who had to explain to me what a TLA is, 3-letter acronym. We have acronyms for acronyms.
Yeah.
It's quite an experience. And I totally dig what you said about culture shock coming from Texas to Seattle. I did that a bunch of years ago when I was younger, and I still think back on that transition to what that was like. So to drill in a little further on this like current environment thing, how has the remote work been for you guys? And open to anybody here. I know we probably all have a lot to say about this that we might not say on a recorded Thursday afternoon panel, but what's that really been like?
I guess I can chime in on that. So it's obviously a lot different than it was before. We're not driving into buildings on Microsoft's main campus or one of Microsoft's campuses in Redmond any longer. We're all at home. And there are some great things and some not so great things about that. Great is we're closer to family. We're closer to we're not spending a bunch of time commuting. You've found, or at least I've found, like a lot of the Microsoft culture has shifted to acceptance, and it's okay. Not that it necessarily wasn't before, but there's a very much, it's like, it's okay to be on a walk and on a call, or to say, I need to go handle something, I'm going to be offline for an hour. Like I've seen this like really fruitful evolution there, where it's actually okay to say, I'm doing something for me, And again, not that it wasn't before, but it's almost like, it's much more common now to be able to say that. So like, for instance, today, I'm like, hey, I'm going to be out for a little while today. I'm going to be on a panel. Great, talk to you afterward. And so I think that's really fruitful. The other side of it, and this is something that as leaders, we have to be very, very cognizant of and very, very careful of, is that cultural balance of work-life balance, I should say, not culture balance, the work-life balance. Are we making sure that ourselves and our teams are shutting down for a period of time? Like I mentioned, I'm lucky enough to have a space in my home where I have an office set up, but it also means that my work is very, very close to me at all times. And so I have to be very cognizant and coach my team on being very cognizant that it's okay to wait for tomorrow. That is a new piece that I would profess I was not ready for when this whole thing shifted. And so I've had to learn that it's actually okay not to respond, and that everybody's work environments are slightly different. I have young children, which means I tend to log off in the late afternoon so I can go interact with them. And I tend to come back online in the evening to finish up whatever I was finishing up. Not everybody follows that pattern, and we're all getting more and more used to that new pattern of, we don't expect everybody to respond at any given moment. You may not be able to find someone at any given moment, and that should be okay. And so I think, like Adam, to kind of, maybe I'm not answering it directly, but I think there's always some balance. There's some things that are interesting and different and actually not so bad, and others that we're just having to learn through. And I think there's an extra element, and I would profess this is part of what I've really appreciated about Microsoft, is there's an extra level of push on us as leaders to make sure we're taking care of our people. Like, how is your team doing? How is your team's balance doing? Are they taking breaks? And I would profess, as a manager, I'm pushed on that. I'm pushed on making sure that my team is healthy.
Yeah, yeah, that's really well said, Mark. And I'll echo what you said about, the responsibilities that we have as people managers. Holy moly, there are weeks when that is super hard, but it's been a learning curve for sure. And I feel a lot more resilient a year into this now than I did at the beginning of it, having learned some things that I wasn't probably doing super well before that I didn't realize until I had to confront it through this pandemic. Uh, Next question. A bit on the topic of diversity and inclusion. What is it like in the company these days? How are people talking about diversity and inclusion? And here I'm not really asking about like the party line, like the official stuff, but more what's the day to day? How employees and people who know one another are engaging on this within teams amongst your friend circles?
I can jump on this one.
Okay.
I think there are two parts of it that I want to talk about. One is in our organization, we have one person that was hired to help us think about diversity and inclusion as her full-time job. But even before she joined, we had many grassroots efforts, part of the team, either because, let's say, the women of the group got together and started those monthly meetings, or a group of people got together to think about, hey, how do we bring more the conversation of inclusion? For example, when you are in a meeting and there are a lot of people, many people trying to talk, how do we help each other by defining easy ways for people to think about, hey, how do I bring people in that are very quiet in the meeting, or raise my hand so people know I'm the next one on turn, instead of being like, oh my God, how do I get in the middle of this conversation? So there were many things that I would want to say that started from grassroots efforts from the team, then to the point that we got this person to help us organize all those many wonderful ideas that the employees themselves were doing and connect them to the many efforts within Microsoft. The other thing that I'm super excited about is investments that relate to responsible AI. Responsible AI, in my mind, is a way to put in practice things that we care and live for diversity and inclusion into our products. It is really to think, hey, when we are doing responsible AI reviews in our products, is thinking about what those products could do to help or harm people, and what should we do to make sure there are mitigations, and just to see the shared diversity of people involved, both in terms of the different roles and the different experiences that they bring. It makes it crystal clear that we make our products more accessible for a large number of people, but also make better products. It's not just about, I look at responsible AI both as in doing the right thing, but also the new capabilities that it brings to the product that is really innovation.
Yeah, that's really great insight, Leah. And that notion of this being more than surface level, that we're really building into this, how we think about product strategy and the technology. That notion around responsible AI is so timely. I mean, when you see the things in the news about the ways in which human engineered machine learning models don't always get it right when they're trained on incomplete or incorrect data, and we got to find a way to fix it.
Yep.
Grace, other thoughts on this?
Yeah, the two things I would like to add. I think from a personal point, I think joining the company, something that I was surprised was how we're all empowered to champion diversity and inclusion in our own way. And so in terms of, knowing that, okay, it's not just my manager's job, it's not just the company's job to make sure that our team is inclusive, or, this is happening. And so for me, I remember when I first joined the company, noticing that I was obviously the youngest person on my team. I went to one of our senior leaders and say like, hey, is there a community for early and career folks, people who are kind of like new and getting used to the company. And he was like, no, we don't actually have one, but we have a DNI PM who's thinking about starting one if you want to join that team. This was about 3 years ago. And I was like, sure. And so that's what we do. We recruited some more early career folks because I'm in the Azure organization and we're rapidly growing. And our whole goal was to help with, retention, right? Because the first year of anyone's experience in a company determines if they want to stay there long term. And so you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And so we started this community, and it was just so amazing to see how many ideas that people had, focusing on, the benefits that they got. Like, okay, how do I get into investing? Like, how do I personal finance? How do I do all these things? How do I meet other people within my org? And so just organizing events based on that community and to see how, that leader empowerment's like, hey, go start this thing. Like, you see a need for a community, you see a need to reach this demographic, why not do that? And giving us the autonomy to kind of run it. And so within Microsoft, I say that all the time, where there are grassroots efforts or things that people notice and say like, hey, I think maybe we should try this out, or I think we should incorporate this. And it's been great to see the encouragement and the fostering of like, hey, yeah, why not go ahead and do it? And I think a second thing, to Mark's point earlier about remote working, which has been different. I think I saw a tweet recently that said we're no longer like working from home, we're living at work because we have our laptops with us everywhere. And so finding that balance can be hard. And I love that. With the remote working, I think a lot of us have had to grow our empathy, because I know for me, before working remotely in the pandemic and everything, I had teammates in China and Atlanta and different time zones, and setting up meetings, I wasn't maybe cognizant of like, oh, okay, is this meeting going to be suitable for someone in the East Coast, or is this meeting going to be suitable for someone in India? So having that mindset of like, okay, not everyone is going to be around my time zone, and being inclusive in that manner. We're asking about, hey, like, we're going to do this, meeting and whatnot. What are your ideas based on your experience or even your culture? And so for me, I would say, being able to take this year, I've been able to grow my empathy for my teammates and other people, and saying like, okay, is this going to be something that's like inclusive for everyone or exclusive? And so just having that mindset, going through like being a year now, I'm just so much aware of so many other things and so many things within my team.
That's so well said, Grace. That notion of recognizing the value of people's lived experience is something that I've seen be very unifying in the informal discussions, even around the company that I've been able to participate in. And just recognizing that sometimes we have to slow down and challenge our own assumptions for what we believe, even down to things like when you book that conference call across time zones. Thanks for that. Doing a quick time check, we're halfway through the hour, and so I've got a couple more planned questions for our panel, and then I think we may start to open it up a bit more to Q&A. So for folks listening in, if you do want to drop something into the Q&A box, now's a great time to do it, and our PCE facilitators will help us to funnel those. Going on to the next question, I'd love to have you guys talk a little bit about what it's like to sort of try and work your way in from the outside. And for folks who are thinking about Microsoft as a potential employer, maybe a place to start would be any pointers or ideas you guys have for how to get noticed, whether you're putting together a resume or a cover letter, or thinking about how to learn more about the company to better prepare for an interview. Mark, any thoughts on this one?
Sure, yeah. So I would say, firstly, it's an excellent question to think about. I would encourage everyone to maybe think about it from the lens of the hiring manager for a second. So when we hire, it's usually a supplementary role to our normal jobs. We're filling a gap on the team. And it's usually an extra short-term responsibility because we're trying to find the right person for our team. And that usually means there's a gap on the team. There's a lack of resources doing the work that we need to be doing. My point in saying that is to say, usually hiring managers are very, very, very busy when they're trying to hire for a role. And so we review dozens of resumes, sometimes daily, we're reviewing resumes. And so the important thing that I think this question is getting to is like, hey, how do I catch a hiring manager's eye? And what are the kind of tactics that I need to use such that I can do that? And I'll give my point of view. I'm sure Adam and the other panelists have points of view as well. And so my recommendation would be to think about your resume as a way of showing how you can help that hiring manager solve that problem, right? The hiring of somebody is, in a sense, to solve a problem. This person is brought in to work on a product to help us achieve our goals. And so how can you help that hiring manager achieve their goals? Specific points in your resume that relate to the job description, like, oh, in the job description, it says that we're going to be working on a mobile product. Cool. Have you any experience with mobile product design or any experience working on mobile products? Mention that. I would focus a lot on impact, the impact of the work that you've done. So what is you've worked on or done, and what impact has it had? Or for folks here that are attending university right now, what is the coursework that you've gone through, and how does that coursework apply to the role that you're applying for? I would profess, when we're looking at like positions where university hires are coming in, we're not looking for massive amounts of impact over time. We understand what we're hiring for and the levels that we're looking at. So nobody's expecting massive amounts of impacts from university hires. It's a different kind of lens for how we look at things. But definitely your coursework, definitely projects, and even internships or other jobs you've had. Even something like, I worked at Starbucks. I worked at Starbucks in college. That's customer empathy. That's customer service. That's like, I know how to work with our users. So just applying that a little bit is super, super helpful. It helps create that connection and will make you stand out. I want to, if I could, Adam, I want to tie in. There was a question in the chat that talked about interviews and how to prepare for those interviews. I have a couple points I wanted to add for that. What I would suggest is focusing on customer and having customer empathy. So who are, like, asking a lot of questions, like who are these users? What do they need? You're going to be asked a lot of questions in interviews. What a lot of hiring managers are looking for is, can you identify or can you relate to our customers and our users such that you can help them with software or products or marketing tactics, things like that. If you're answering engineering or product related questions, ask a ton of clarifying questions. We're looking for clarifying questions. We're usually not very transparent and kind of opaque on purpose. We're looking to see if you ask us clarifying questions about what the problem really is that we're trying to solve, and be really, really comfortable with a whiteboard. Like, enjoy, like, the whiteboard is your friend. You want to be up on the whiteboard drawing and thinking about things and working through things.
Yeah, those are great points, Mark. And I especially love that you talked about the interview experience as well. Obviously, it's a little different interviewing for a job at Microsoft right now, over Teams or Zoom. But those fundamentals, I think, still resonate, and especially that notion of not being afraid to ask those clarifying questions or to get the whiteboard virtually or otherwise. Flavia?
I want to add one thing that relates to your resume. And it's something that comes to the resumes that I receive, that over time, it really caught my attention. So it may be helpful for some of you. But especially in technology, where areas keep evolving so fast, it's very common that people are going to be taking some training, let's say in data science, and then they are trying to apply for their first job of data science, while their previous experiences in another area. And then it may feel hard to write this resume because your experience was mostly in training. But one thing that you can do on that is sometimes people create either a website that shows, hey, here are projects that I did, points to GitHub so I can see the quality of the code. Like, even if your experience is not exactly in a company, but let's say at UW or a different training that you have done, or maybe by volunteering or by a hackathon, all those things count, and you need to tell that story.
Yeah, that's really outstanding, Flavia. And the experiential stuff, the applied stuff like hackathons, those non-traditional experiences, I will second what you said. When I look at resumes, when I talk with candidates, I love seeing that kind of experience because it shows that people are eager and willing to take risks and to frankly do things that don't necessarily fit the mold of what you're supposed to do, if that makes sense. I think there's often a lot more value to be found in those surprising experiences or non-traditional tracks, especially when we think about building diverse teams from a skills and experience standpoint. How about you, Grace? Other thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, plus one and everything that's been mentioned. I think being able to um, tell your story in terms of like your resume is so important because I do feel like people get overwhelmed with trying to share every experience. As someone who's been on both sides of the seats of being an interviewer or being an interviewee, I think it's important to, you know, like someone mentioned, I think Mark, like showcase the impact that you have. I know impact can feel like a huge word, but really showcasing, even if it's one of your favorite projects. You know, I've had interviews where people just, there was a project that they just loved, whether it's something they did for a nonprofit or something that they did through a course, but they're able to walk through, you know, the steps of like, okay, this is what I did, especially if it's in engineering. Okay, this is how I built the back end and the front end. They're able to tell the story of how they built a particular project or a particular product. And I would say to get noticed, utilize LinkedIn. I feel like people sometimes it can feel overwhelming of like, okay, I need to be able to be this perfect person and have everything great. But something that I told some of my mentees is that create content of what you're passionate about, right? If there's HoloLens that you love, what articles are you reading? What articles are you sharing, right? Like show that you have a passion for something outside of just the standardized like resume and what's on your profile. And so that's something that can help you be memorable, right? And not everyone has to go out there and be a YouTuber or be a blogger, but find something that you really care about, because that's how I think you are going to be memorable in that manager's or that in that recruiter's eyes, because they know like, okay, wow, we've seen their posts, we've seen their articles. It looks like something that they're really passionate about. And I think that's something that will also help in terms of creating that lasting memory in terms of, you know, being memorable, because I guarantee you hiring managers go through a lot of applications and resumes and things like that. And so if there's a way for you to be memorable, definitely I would say create content and don't be afraid to network and engage with other people's content in the field or technology that you are passionate about. And I saw a message about, or a question about the LEAP program. Someone talked about studying, I think, nuclear engineering. So yeah, with LEAP, it's on a rolling basis. Right now, it's open to not just software engineering, but we also have tracks for business program managers. We had a design track, a support track. So it's not just engineering based. I think I'll post the link. And I think for those who are trying to transition into tech or even engineering, it can be hard sometimes, especially if you've had a gap in your work history. But really focus on the transferable skills, because I feel a lot of people feel like, okay, I'm entering into tech, I have nothing to offer, or my background doesn't suit this new role I'm looking for. But actually, if you take a step back, analyze, you know, the career or the industry you're coming from into tech, you realize there's a lot of commonalities. Something that's big is, you know, customer obsession and being able to communicate what you're learning. So I tell people like focus on the transferable skills that you have. And often that can be a great discussion when it comes time for the interview and talking about your resume and talking about your past.
Yeah, that was outstanding, Grace. For folks who are listening in, don't forget this is recorded, so you may want to listen back to the last couple of minutes, what Grace shared there. Some really, really great pointers for how to think about showing up with impact. I think from here, we're ready to start taking on some of the questions in the Q&A window. Hi again, Joe. And I see.
Hi, everyone. Gosh, great info here. Thank you so much for all of the insights. We think probably the best thing to do is start at the top. We've had a lot of people ask that first question about tenure. Microsoft's got an amazing, I think, history of having long tenure employees.
Yeah.
So what do you want to say about that? Why do people stay?
Why do people stay? You know, I think Flavia can probably speak about this with unique perspective since she's been here since 2001. What do you think, Flavia?
Yeah, I'll go for it. So for me, choosing the place you want to work is very personal. I'll tell you my answer for the question. One, Microsoft has so many teams that tackle so many different problems that, let's say you spend some time on a team and you are like, you know what, I'm ready for working on something completely different. You don't need to change companies. You can stay in the same company and work on something completely different. I work from SQL Server to the MSN browser to mail app, now to HoloLens. Like each one was a different world. So for me, that's an important reason. I need from time to time to get into something new, and I can do that in the same company.
Yeah.
The second piece has to do with the amazing people I work with, the great benefits, to be frank. I would say over the years, I don't know, I would say I have a heart for Microsoft. It's a long relationship in my life. So I can say that part of it is emotional too.
I can relate to that, Flavia. I've been here about half as long as you, about 10 years. And I think what you described really resonates. The thing I would add to it is over the decade I've been at Microsoft, in addition to being able to job hop and try new things, and learn new things and build new things, I've been able to do it while taking care of the rest of my life too. It isn't a team environment where I've had to choose between happiness and productivity in life and happiness and productivity at work. And I think that, because I joined sort of on the later years of the Ballmer days, kind of transitioning to Satya, and I had him as an SVP for a long time before he was CEO. I think that attitude of like, this work is only good if it allows the rest of our lives to be good too, is an important part of why I've stayed and why I'm happy to stay, not just, I guess I'll keep doing this. Yeah, I know we have a bunch of other questions, but
yes, let's move to the next one. So our audience, a lot of people have great experience from different jobs that they've done and are coming to study with UW-PCE, possibly to think about a slight shift or gain other skills. If they're thinking about jobs at Microsoft and they don't have tech experience, what opportunities are there, do you think, for people who do have great transferable skills and worked on in other jobs?
Sure. Well, I'll say something quick, but then I think Mark, you may want to chime in here as the fellow marketer. I came to Microsoft after having worked in management consulting, and before that, I was a professional musician. So if I can do it, you guys can do it. What do you think, Mark?
I was like, it's good. I'm gonna stop there. Yeah, I would totally agree. I think I do not have a software engineering degree. I have a human-centered design degree, but I would say you don't have to really understand the fundamentals of software development to work at Microsoft, to be a leader at Microsoft, to be a manager, a director, senior director, GM at Microsoft. You don't have to have that. The thing that I would suggest that I suggest you think about is what's really helpful is if you're able to understand how the technology roughly works. Like there's a mobile app, cool. It's an app, it's a piece of software that we deploy, versus like Windows is another piece of software application that we deploy. So being able to understand from a rough sense of like what the technology is, you do not need to understand how to write the code. We have incredible developers and incredible software engineering managers like Flavia, like they know how to run that stuff. From a marketing standpoint, we work very little in the product kind of engineering side. And so I would just say to kind of maybe shore up this statement, it would be, there's a ton of different excellent opportunities, and there's not a minimum bar for, you must have a master's of software engineering to do it. Not at all.
Yeah, well said.
Can I just add a follow-up question to that, which is that sometimes you see Microsoft jobs mentioned where the job ad asks for some experience with Microsoft. And I'm wondering, like, how can people get that experience with Microsoft if they haven't worked there?
That's a really good follow-up, Joe. And I feel like you may have served that one up just for me because that's what I did. So I mentioned that I did consulting work before I came to Microsoft. I actually started out as a vendor doing contracting work where I got to work alongside Microsoft employees and managers. And that was how I learned what Microsoft is all about from the outside. And it led to a pretty organic opportunity for me to go in-house with a team that I was working with. And that's one example of how you might begin in a contractor role or in a vendor role or in working in a company that partners with Microsoft as a way to get to know our ecosystem and how we do business. And the great news about that is there are a lot of companies in the Puget Sound region who meet that profile. working with Microsoft. Great.
And yeah, I just want to add to the previous question. I feel like in every panel I'm on, I that question comes up because obviously tech is heavy with engineering. That's like our bread and butter in terms of building products. But I would definitely say from the outside looking in, those job roles might not be as visible because there's always, you know, positions for hiring engineers, and that's amazing. And so for me, I definitely have this issue because even as a student, I'm like, okay, outside of software engineering, like what is there, you know? And since joining the company, you know, that's what led me to start my podcast because I wanted to highlight non-technical roles that anybody can work in. And afterwards, if they want to like move into like working on the actual product and they have a love for that they can. And so some roles to highlight, you know, UX, UI, you can do marketing, you can also work with, you know, with customers in terms of customer support or also documentation. I know a lot of people who are great writers and they love technology and they're like, how can I marry those two passions? So if you're into that, there's definitely a lot of, as we continue to build products, we need people to able to describe them and write them for different levels of people because working from a customer focused job is so interesting to see how I can read something, but someone if they're using the product for the first time, they might not understand either the acronyms or the languages where we're using. And so good documentation is so needed right now as tech continues to evolve and products continue to evolve. Being a program manager, a product manager, there's just so much, you know, and I think being able to kind of look through, once again, bringing up LinkedIn, on LinkedIn and looking at, okay, what are some roles that people who work at Microsoft are doing, and just kind of look into their titles and look at job requirements and see what is needed in terms of like background and whatnot. Like having a CS degree is definitely not a requirement to work in tech whatsoever. And so if you had a different degree, there are different ways that you can marry your passion with technology. It just sometimes just takes a little bit more researching and whatnot. But yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there.
Great
I
points.
also want to add two pieces. There are actually two people on my team that came from a biology background. One is a PM that manages data collection. It's like, how do you plan for the data collection? How you explain this collection? What is the right distribution for this collection? What she needed is, I need to pick this complex problem, structure it, and execute. And she does it extremely well. And the other person, he's actually a software engineer on my team. He graduated at UW on biology. And he's an amazing software engineer. He joined in initially as a vendor, and then he got better and better and better, and he is amazing. So don't look at your previous experience as something that holds you back. Look at your previous experience as something that can bring something special to the table. And the other thing that I want to say from my personal experience, I have applied to positions that had requirements that were like, what? You need this? I still applied, even though I didn't have this one or two thing that was in this giant list of requirements. Don't let it hold you back. There are so many other things that make you a great fit for that position. So look at what you can do, not the smaller set of things that may not make you like the perfect candidate, because for most cases, there is no perfect candidate. There are people that have this angle, people that have this other angle. Go, give it a try and say why you believe you can make it.
Yeah.
That's awesome advice. There are a couple of questions that we haven't got much time, but there are two sort of questions that seem to be themes in the Q&A. One is around people who have a lot of experience and maybe are getting into their 40s or 50s or 60s. What about older people applying for jobs at Microsoft? Can you give any perspective on, you know, how they should go about making sure that they're considered?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Joe. I want to take a shot at this one, but Flavia and Mark, as hiring managers, if you guys want to call on too, please do. I think from my own direct experience that having diversity of ages on my team is one of the things that makes us super strong. And I think for any of us who has spent much time watching trends in technology, it's pretty well documented that there are pockets of the tech industry that experience what we would call ageism in either in the outcomes that we see in terms of who gets hired or in the processes themselves, sometimes having inherent bias that isn't intended. I can tell you from my own experience on my team, we've got folks who span, I think, maybe 3 or 4 decades. I'm not entirely sure because frankly, I don't know. But man, the experience that you bring to bear from other sectors, other categories, other functions, I cherish that experience, and I love having people who bring that experience to the table. I think that the best things you can do is recognize, like Flavia said, hey, what are the things that I know how to do because of this experience, right? Don't look at all the things that you don't have in common with the typical candidate. And if you're unsure about whether you're a fit, one thing that those of us with more career experience have a remarkable advantage on is just the power of our networks, the people that we know, who we've worked with over the years. Maybe start by reaching out to those folks and talking to them and getting to know the space that you're interested in at Microsoft, and see if that gives you a little bit more of a lens into whether it's a team for you. But truly, I would say don't second guess yourself on that, because there are so many great opportunities where that experience that you bring is absolutely going to be an asset.
Thank you. Can I just, adding on to that question, when people are applying for jobs and they've seen something that they think they might be a fit for, what's your advice on getting internal referrals through people that you might know either through past jobs or personal networks? How does that work at Microsoft, and how valuable is it in the kind of process of getting through to an interview loop?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in general, I think the best referral you can ever get to any job in any team in any company is from someone who knows that team or who understands something about what that team is trying to do. Because think about what Mark said about putting yourself in the shoes of the hiring manager. You want an introduction, if you're going to get one, from someone who understands what it's like to be that hiring manager and what kind of problem they're solving, because that's the person who's going to be able to say, hey, I see what you're doing there. Here's someone that you might want to talk to, right? And so those are the kinds of networking that I think can be most impactful in general. And this is what I tell my students in product strategy as well, regardless of the company that you're trying to network into. And I would say in that respect, Microsoft is no different. Mark, do you have other thoughts on this?
No, I think that's well said, Adam. The one other thing I might suggest is, a lot of times, getting to Grace's comment, like a lot of times on LinkedIn, you'll see someone post like, I'm hiring, here's the role. Yeah. If you feel like that role applies to you, you should 100% reach out to that person and say, I'd like to do an informational with you. Absolutely. I think I would probably do it. Like, absolutely, let's talk. Like, maybe it's a good fit, maybe it's not, but that to me is an invitation for, like, if you think you're a good fit, I'm happy to talk about it. And informationals are very, very simple, because there's no commitment on either side. You might find out like, yeah, actually I don't want to do that role, and vice versa. So it's actually an excellent opportunity that I would suggest. And Adam, I think you said it perfectly well. Like a lot of times it's I understand what this hiring manager is trying to do. I actually know someone that could be a good fit for you. You might want to talk to this person. That's a good answer.
There's a question at the top of the list, which is about remote work. And I know there's been a recent news article about people potentially being able to come back into the office in Seattle sometime soon. I just wondered whether people who are, say, not within close vicinity of, say, Microsoft Office Hub, should they consider applying for those jobs and consider, the opportunity to be a remote worker on a long-term basis? Like, do you know what the policy is around people being able to potentially work remotely on a long-term basis?
Sure. So I'll give a quick capsule summary of our policy, broadly speaking. And the short answer here is, if you are interested in being a remote worker at Microsoft, definitely go for it. From a policy standpoint, and I suspect we may find that our leaders will continue to evolve the thinking at the company level as we learn more about how we can return to the office safely. Employees are now given the go-ahead to work remotely part-time, so like half-time, for example, under pretty much any circumstance. And that was an announcement that was made, I think, a few months ago in recognition of the fact that we were all kind of wondering, hey, where's this headed, right? And so our leadership team has been trying to keep us, in the know about what they know for sure and try to keep that current. The question of what it's going to be like when we start to pile back into the office, man, I think we're all kind of wondering that too, because just imagine, if you will, that most people on your team start to work from home part-time. Okay, how do you coordinate team meetings where you want actually people to be on site? Do you pick one day a week where all the meetings happen? Okay, well, it's going to be hard to find a conference room on those days. Now what do you do? Right, so there's this kind of cascade of decisions I think we won't even realize we'll have to make yet. But I will say, as a manager of a team of about 30 people, mix of vendors and FTEs, who work in, I think, 4 different states now, and one was just working internationally for a little while. We've gotten very okay with the idea that remote work is going to be the new normal, and when we get the opportunity to get back together, yes, we're going to love doing it, but it's not, not being able to do it won't stop us from being able to work at our best.
We are about time, I'm afraid. Does anyone have a last thing that they really are bursting to say to the audience as a wrap up?
What do you think, Daniel?
Not really bursting to say, but I really do enjoy working at Microsoft, and I feel like a lot of people sometimes it may feel unattainable, because I definitely felt that way. So if you've applied and you're applying, keep applying, doing those interviews, because interviewing is a skill, and every time you go through it, you learn more about yourself, you learn more about the process. And so just keep at it and find ways to differentiate yourself. And like Mark said, like when you see people posting about job positions, please reach out to them. And then if they don't respond, follow up, in a nice manner, because I do feel like some people just get really excited and keep sending messages. But if they're opening that channel, feel free to follow up and say like, hey, I saw this posting. Please tell me more about it. And usually people are more than willing to, either jump in a call or give you more information now that we are working remotely. And so think about those things. And for me personally, I'm always happy to talk to people. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn to answer more questions regarding the LEAP program or things like that. So thank you so much. This was fun being on the panel.
One comment I would add is you might apply, get an interview, do a loop, feel great, hiring manager feels great, and still may not get the job. And it may have nothing to do with you. I feel like that's an important thing that we don't talk about. There may be different things going on that require or lend themselves to a different candidate being a better fit. And that says nothing about you or your qualifications or how well you interviewed. We don't really talk about that much. And I think we need to talk about it more.
Yeah, don't take it personal.
Yeah, for sure.
That's really good to hear, Mark. Thank you. And thanks for your encouragement, Grace, Flavia, Adam. You've been really it's been an awesome way to spend lunch time today. And I think that our folks have really going to take away some good information that will help them. So thank you very much to our panel from Microsoft. We appreciate your time. And next month, we'll be doing the same with friends from T-Mobile. We have a session on April 29th planned, talking about hiring, the Un-carrier approach to hiring with friends from T-Mobile. So just want to say thank you for coming. Thank you to our panel, and good luck to everyone on your next steps. Thank you.